Thanks, Andrew. And I wouldn't blame you, some of you, to be a little bit confused. You've come to listen to a session on data collection and visualization, and this woman's going to get up and talk to you about electrification yet again. But don't worry, I assure you that it will all become abundantly clear in no time. So my name is Emilie Ditton. It's really great to be at IMARC again this year, and thank you to all of you for joining the session today. I am the mining and metals segment leader for Schneider Electric. So what that means is that I work with our customers, both mining companies and ecosystem partners, and our teams to bring the best of the awesome technology and innovation from Schneider Electric and AVEVA to mining companies and their challenges in this market, and in particularly in the Pacific region, so Australia and New Zealand. So Schneider Electric and AVEVA have been leaders of innovation, particularly in the interspace of IT-OT convergence, and with a lens in particular on the decarbonisation transformation for a really long time. In fact, it's really why I joined the company. I'm an engineer with a background in digital advisory, having joined from Capgemini, who I think we heard from in this room earlier today. But I was with analyst firm IDC for a really long time, working with mining companies on their digital transformation roadmaps and with the suppliers to mining companies, particularly in terms of providing advisory about how to effectively take advantage of data within operations. And so electrification would change everything. Electrification is a massive part of the decarbonisation transformation that this industry is on. And like all transformations within the mining sector, we are more focused on the things, the electrified haulage, the charging systems, the BESS systems, the renewable systems, than we are on the way that the system works. And so in terms of really realising that the outcomes in terms of the sustainability and decarbonisation transformation, first of all, but also the associated efficiency and operational excellence capabilities, my contention is really focusing on this electrified, automated and unified operation, and how we get there is a really critical part of realising those outcomes. So some of you will be aware of Schneider Electric being a provider of electric infrastructure and expertise, and of advanced control system infrastructure and expertise, capabilities and expertise rather. And some of you will be aware of AVEVA. Convergio was talking about AVEVA's PI system, but AVEVA, in terms of being a provider of industrial software, particularly capabilities like Pi and Ampler. But many of you may not necessarily be aware of the way that Schneider Electric and AVEVA's capabilities come together to really provide end-to-end capabilities, from connected products through edge control, through the Pi data platform, and industrial software, from engineering solutions through to operations. And the way that those capabilities end-to-end can support the profiles or the personas within our mining operations. So really showcasing that at IMARC this year has been a really big focus of ours in terms of how we're choosing to tell our story. And so electrification will really change everything about how we operate in this sector. But I guess before we get into the details of how and why, let's talk a little bit about some of those data points. So electrification absolutely will obviously drive an enormous shift in electrical demand within mining operations. McKinsey's research says that something like electrification of mines will something like double electricity demand. We are seeing an enormous continued acceleration of digital maturity within mining operations. EY says that 50% of mining companies are expecting to increase spending on AI, innovation and R&D, and electrification will continue to accelerate and drive that. access to capital is a huge driver of the decarbonisation transformation for mining companies. Accenture's research has shown that 63% of investors are willing to divest or avoid investing in mining companies not pursuing decarbonisation sufficiently. But I think within that study, another really important point was highlighted, which is that while the decarbonisation transformation is really critical for access to capital, what is the most significant driver of market value of mining companies is how effective the implementation of digital and advanced technology and new technology in terms of how that is implemented. And really that brings us to a really critical point here, which is that the outcomes in terms of sustainability and decarbonisation, efficiency and operational excellence that we're trying to achieve cannot be achieved through electrification without digital. And that fundamentally what that means is that electrification will change how the power decision making is brought forward within how we make decisions operationally within mining operations. It will change the way that we think about how that system needs to be managed and the fact that we are recognising that we are managing a system. And that ultimately it will change the operating model fundamental to how we operate mines from a production, downtime and decision-making perspective. So here we have 5 of the typical personas that we might find at site. And on most sites, we would typically find that we have operations management and maintenance management, of course, who are managing production and downtime decisions through support of integrated planning. And most mining companies have quite sophisticated, usually real-time capabilities in place to do that. But as we shift to an electrified-based operating model, what that means is that we need to be able to incorporate energy management in those production and downtime decisions. And we need to incorporate sustainability in terms of understanding what the implications are for carbon footprint. So that ultimately what we're really doing is changing the operating model of how this works fundamentally for the business. And core to that also is what we would refer to as the electrification backbone. So not just within operations, but also more critically within how we design new projects. So what is that backbone of insight, knowledge, management, decision-making that enables us to integrate production, downtime, energy management, decarbonisation, to really be in and carbon footprint rather, to be in a position to really manage that outcome as we go. So simple, you say, but actually really this is not. So this is really a very complicated system that we are seeking to put in place and manage. Putting aside the fact that the vast majority of mining companies really don't have the expertise that we need in place to be able to do this yet. So really what we are trying to do here, of course, is to manage a complicated system of demand and supply balance in scenario of the production of a mining operation, very often with a dynamic of intermittency in the renewable capabilities. And that fundamentally, as I say, this cannot be achieved without a significant step up in digital transformation. And that fundamentally that is required within the electrical operational layer in terms of real-time analytics and insight, and in the energy management layer in terms of bringing together energy management and production with sophisticated analytics and capabilities that are able to do that. But I think the contention that I'd like to make here is that really this is not a question of continuing to do things as we've always done them. But fundamentally what we need to be doing here in terms of that digital transformation and what that looks like is integrating, driving the electrification transformation and really embedding the digital capabilities to really create and drive that decarbonised data-led operation. And so for the rest of this session, I'll talk a little bit about 3 key areas of how we think, where we think the focus needs to be in terms of how we actually undertake this and do this. First of all, in terms of bringing the humans into the system, what does the collaboration and management look like that we need to have in place across the people that are undertaking the management and control of our operations across multiple sites and incorporating the enterprise as well? What contextual data, absolutely critical, but what does that actually really look like? How do we incorporate a single pane of glass in how we can manage and facilitate decision making? How do we integrate OT, IT, but then also critically engineering technology into the way that those data sets come together and enable outcomes? And lastly, the foundation. So there were some discussions around Gen AI and AI in the previous sessions, but fundamentally both in terms of how we access information through Gen AI, but then also what's the future-ready control system environment, automation environment that needs to be in place to enable that. So if we're going to talk about a data-driven operation or a data-driven decarbonised operation, how does that behave? And really fundamentally, this is all about empowering people through information literacy. So that physical assets become information appliances, so that products become information streams, so that work processes become information loops, and so that workers become problem solvers, being able to really undertake judgment. And fundamentally, this is really about enabling the capacity for everyone to undertake agility and imaginative judgment in how we go about running our operation. So that at the end of the day, what we're doing is really building this digital nervous system to enable the agility and the resiliency in how our operations are undertaken. And at the end of the day, this really requires data in context. But where are we in terms of that digital transformation? So in the last 10 or 15 years, there has been enormous investments in by mining companies in their digital transformations. So if we kind of work from left to right across mobility, platforms and cloud, automation, industrial IoT, predictive analytics, and we have built increasing maturity through digitisation, then monitoring, intelligence and edge control. But still, mining companies are really challenged in 2 key areas. One is being able to take advantage of the data to really impact the value and the decision making within the organisation on a consistent and integrated basis. And second of all, being able to do that to enable processes and workflows in a really meaningful way that's coordinated across the whole business. So if we talk a little bit about the first of those 3 elements that I was talking to. So first of all, bringing humans into the system. So if we think about the management of a remote operation, of a mining operation remotely, I think you could akin it to taking an orchestra, breaking apart the musical players, putting them in different geographical locations and then asking them to play a symphony in a coordinated way that resembled beauty. So that at the bottom of this slide, we have the people who are at site or in the plant, controlling and managing those operations on a day-to-day basis. And then we have the people who we learnt through COVID didn't necessarily need to be at site as much as we thought they did. So this might be the metallurgists or the asset managers, the maintenance planners, people who do need to get to site. They do need to be at site sometimes, but not nearly as often as we previously thought they needed to be. And then, of course, we've got like corporate functions and really critical people like the data scientists and our capacity to really take advantage of those capabilities in this whole system. And what here we want to be able to do is really coordinate that orchestral symphony. We want to be able to enable people to collaborate, to make decisions in a contextual basis, not just for their own tasks, but also the tasks for teams around them. We want people to be able to do that imaginatively and with agility. And so to be able to do that, we really need to be able to provide a capability that's about the industrial cockpit. So that they can understand, what is happening now, what has been happening, what are the physical dimensions that decisions need to be made within or new capabilities need to be added to, and what are the engineering specifications for the equipment that's at site, and the limitations of it. And to be able to do that, what you really need to be able to provide is this kind of idea of contextual alignment, so that you can coordinate, but also so that you can provide a consistency to the nature of a consistency that draws from a consistent data set and provides insight to the business, contextual to the decisions that those people need to be making, and then can kind of build together as a whole. So we're trying to enable consistency and contextualization in the data sets, and fundamental to do that and to enable that, what's required really is to bring together all of the elements, all of the layers of data that are related to a product, or rather to a process, whether that be operational data, workflow and processes, business rules, maintenance data, all of the elements of data that describe how a process is operating, and bring that together as a way of really understanding how that data is interrelated, and then be able to be in a position to really drive that contextualization. And so typically those pieces of data are accessed from different workflows, different systems, very often broken apart and distributed across the business. And what we're trying to do now through the data model is bring them together so that we're able to, by bringing together energy data and process data, for example, have an understanding of the impact from an efficiency perspective, or through maintenance data and process data, have an understanding from a productivity perspective, really being able to drive that contextualization. And so if we have an example of a pump, so we have a pump here, and we want to look at that data. So on the left-hand side here, we have all of the attributes of that pump, which describe how that pump will operate, and all of the elements of that pump. And so then if we look at an asset, for example, those attributes and how they operate are really defined depending on the relevant pieces of data that you need. And increasingly, we're taking advantage of artificial intelligence to really have an impact on the application of that data and the application of that data model to the specific decision making that we want to be able to make within the organisation. And then on the right-hand side here, we have a representation of the way that we see making that insight and data available to the different personas within our unified operating centre environment. So really taking that data model with all of those attributes of that data, and then reflecting and providing the relevant and contextualised insight in the context of an integrated environment on an end-to-end basis that enables that insight. And to do that, really at the core is this capability of having a single pane of glass, so that we have a single data model at the centre of this slide, and then that data reflected or provided based on the requirements and the objective requirements of each of the personas that we're talking about here. So we have the engineering manager who's really looking at to define the boundary conditions from a design perspective. We have the sustainability manager really looking to define the boundary conditions from a sustainability perspective of the operation. And we have the operations manager, for example, who's really looking to optimise within those boundaries. And so this kind of conceptual idea of bringing together all of those data sets in a single pane of glass, a very conceptual idea and one that's been around for some time, but fundamentally critical to then being able to enable this coordination and contextualization environment that I'm talking to. And so ultimately what we're trying to do here is really create this single contextualized visualization experience. And so on this slide, if we look from the left-hand side and move over, we've got engineering data, whether that be 1D or 2D documents. We've got operational data, whether that comes from the PI system or another historian. And we want to be able to contextualize that data. So our partners at Aviva have Capability Connect, which is really an abstraction layer that enables us to bring together data sets from Schneider Electric and Aviva software capabilities, but also third parties, to really enable essentially those data sets, that documentation, that engineering insight, that time series data to be queried. So what we're utilising here is Gen AI capabilities, not so much to find the right document or to find the right piece of information, but really to ask questions of those documents, to inquire about the specific pieces of information required from those documents. And this is really able to be presented in this way because of the access to multiple sets of data across process data, operations data, time series data, business data, and then the ability to present that data potentially in a persona-specific environment, on a self-service based environment, but really be in a position to ask that data questions. And because there are so many different kinds of data that can be incorporated into that system, what that then means is that we can ask the system more different kinds of questions, and not just typical questions of what has happened, what is happening, what might happen, but also questions around descriptive analytics, diagnostic analytics, predictive analytics, prognostic and risk-related analytics. So really enabled by the number of different kinds of data available together in that system, and then being able to enable the abstraction layer to do that. And the last critical point to that really is the control system environment in terms of enabling that outcome. So, I think control systems were designed in the 1960s sometime. The paradigm now that we're really working towards is one that really is about enabling insight, real-time decision-making and analytics in terms of how that future-ready control system environment is enabled. And so many of our team at the booth would love to talk to you about our capabilities in this space. And so ultimately what we're talking about here is the capabilities that are about supporting that electrified, automated and unified environment, from connected assets through edge control, through software capabilities, in order that by bringing together digital capabilities and electric, we are really able to support that sustainability transformation, and where electrification truly will change everything. So please come and visit us on booth 17. We have a few members of our team here. Me, of course, our mining lead from Aviva globally. Ella Kashi is one of our global solution architects focused on the mining sector, and Javier Orellana leads our digital consulting capabilities, and you might find some donuts. Thanks.